Hello and welcome to Equine Voices. My name is Ronnie and I'm your host for today's interview. I am very, very delighted to have a lovely lady from, I'm sorry, I've just written a little bit back so I don't forget, from Oregon Choice Tribe called Jordanna Anawalt. I'm going to call her Jo because that's what she said I can call her. Now, I came across Jo on Warwick Schiller's podcast. And for those of you that watch and listen to my podcast, you know I'm a great fan of Warwick's podcasts. And I just loved it. It was just, it so resonated. And everything she said was, I felt it in my heart too, which a lot of people did. And I thought, oh, I'd love to chat to her. And it was straight away after the interview, I sent her an email and she kindly agreed to come on. I didn't think it was going to be quite so quick. So all I know about Jo is what I heard on Warwick's podcast and what we're going to talk about tonight. So without further ado, I'll bring her in and she can introduce herself and explain about her work and how she works with horses and how she got into this work in the first place. So here we go. I'll bring her in. Hi, Jo.
Hi. Thanks for having me on.
You are very welcome. Now, before we start the conversation, you gave me some information before we started. So would you like to just to share that in case you have to rush off anywhere?
Yes. I have an elderly horse who is having some health issues in the last 24 hours. So I'm staring out the window watching him. And if something looks like it's needing my attention, I will get off the call and go attend to him. So if there's a sudden stop, that's why. Thank you for understanding.
Oh, you're very welcome. Horses come first. This is great for you to do this, but that's not as important as the horses are. Okay, so would you like to start first of all and explain to people first of all who you are and how you got into the horse world?
Yeah. I am a Hoopa woman descending from Northern California. I currently live in Bend, Oregon, and split my time between here and the homestead that my family has in Hawaii. Horses have been a part of my energetic being since I was small. I was the kid who, when I was given a doll, threw it in the garbage and went to play with my Breyer horses. And have always had a deep connection to both animals and the plant relatives and our elemental relatives. So I've been able to hear through different modalities of hearing what our plant, animal, and elemental relatives have said since an early age. And horse was always a guiding energy. Now, I didn't grow up around horses. We lived in an area and we were in a place in our family's finances where horses were not something that were on the table. But that didn't stop the draw or hold back the connection I had to them. So my first horse experience outside of, a stable ride or a pony ride at the fair, or running up to fences as a kid to pet horses over the fence whenever I saw them, was when I was 15. And my family was in the middle of some intense emotional and structural changes. And on my way home from school every day, I drive by this dry paddock. And there was this small horse. At the time, I didn't even know terminology for horses. So I now know she was a yearling and she was all by herself. And I drive by her every day and she was beautiful, buttermilk buckskin in color. And I started to develop this relationship with her just on that passed by every couple of hours throughout the day. And I started to walk my dog down there, and it became my daily way to step out of what was happening in my family life that I felt I couldn't escape. My walk to go see this horse was that escape. And over the course of a few months, I developed a really strong attachment to her. I named her Her name was Honeybee. And it got to the point where even when I would just drive by and call her name out of my window, she'd whinny and she'd run up and down the fence line. And I had this feeling, like this knowing, I was like, this is my horse. And we didn't have property to have a horse. I was 15 and finishing up grade 12 and working part-time. And how was a horse going to fit into this? But I just knew this is my horse. And so things unfolded in the form of me actually ending up contacting like animal control here in the States would be like the welfare organization that looks after animals, because this young horse went from being healthy looking and had weight on her, and that region of California gets really hot in the summer, and she had been no feed. She was eating sticks out of the tree. Her water trough had moss on it, and she was a bag of bones. She looked like a skeleton standing up. And so I contacted the Humane Society, and they had someone come out and assess her, and I got in trouble for feeding her hay over the fence. I was told, you can't do that anymore. She's not your horse. You need to back off. We're going to find out who owns her. So there was no house on this property. It was just a vacant lot. They were going to take it from there. So I had to pull back and just drive by her and stop all physical contact. But I continued to speak to her across my heart to her heart. And after 30 days, which was the period they had to hold her there for, she disappeared. And I remember the day that I drove by that lot and there was no horse anymore. Honeybee was gone, and my whole being collapsed. And it was a stronger feeling than it had been up until that point of, that's my horse. I have to do everything in my power to find her and to acquire her. And I don't know how, but I'll figure it out. And I spent the next several weeks driving around that part of the countryside, which I guess was just an assumption, even that she was still in that area. But I did it. I drove around and I would just call her name out of my car for hours at a time. And I remember the day that I heard her call back, and I could see way at the back of this property, the tips of her ears sticking up over this really tall fence. And there I was. I think I had turned 16 at that point, but I marched up to this house and knocked on their door, and, you have my horse. I was very sure, and like, this is my horse. And that started a multi-month conversation with this family, who was, one, very angry with me that I had contacted animal control. Their understanding or level of care that they had for their livestock was different than what even the legal standards are, but what I thought was correct. So I had, by calling them in, gotten them in trouble. So they were upset with me. I was not their favorite person. I was proclaiming that this was my horse and how do I buy her? I'd like to acquire her. And that also didn't sit well on their palate, I think, but I was persistent. There was this knowing in me that was like, this is your horse. You have to do everything to fight for her. So one day, one afternoon on their doorstep, finally, the woman says, okay, like, we're done with you showing up here every day. We will sell her to you for this amount. And I was like, no, like, that's way too much. And no, you haven't even cared for her. I'm not going to pay you for this horse that you're not even caring for. Like, I'm willing to give her a good home. And I'm not a good negotiator, but I apparently was a good negotiator that day, because I got them down to a very small adoption fee. And we signed a bill of sale, and then I had to figure out how I was going to get her home, or where home even was, because again, we didn't have horse property. We didn't have a horse trailer. Like, I went into this just following my intuition and this impulse, with nothing in place foundationally to take care of this animal, or horse experience to even know how to take care of a horse. all those pieces fell into place. And I got to bring Honeybee home. And that moment in life is the spark that began everything that is Choice Tribe with the equine component. So Choice Tribe, I really believe, started that spark was set into my soul when I was 12 years old. And I tell that story in the Work podcast. It was an experience with a higher being when I was hospitalized for a suicide attempt. And choice was dropped into my soul. But when Honeybee became my best friend, when we got to be in partnership together, I was gifted the greatest teacher thus far in my life. I didn't know at the time, and these things I found out in the weeks after I acquired her, that she was an orphan. So the reason she was by herself in that yard was because she lost her mom when she was 2 weeks old. So she had lived by herself from 2 weeks onward, and then lived on that piece of property with no other animals at all from 4 months on. So that created a horse. Not only did I have no horse experience, I then adopted this animal who was more of a predator than a prey animal. She was fearful of everything, but in a way that manifested or came outwardly as aggression. So Honey and I began our journey, and that led us from California to Oregon and to my first horse mentor, who put me in a situation, sat me down in a conversation, said, "You have a choice," after she met Honey and saw us interact together. And she said, "This horse is incredibly dangerous. She is a predator. She has very few prey behaviors. That's because she was orphaned and she had to move from a place of survival. And flight wasn't a good choice. Fight became the choice that she needed to choose. And she wasn't willing to work with Honey and I unless I made the choice. I chose and committed to doing everything necessary for the lifetime of this animal to make sure she felt safe. And that was the beginning of what I call life lessons with horses. I thought it was horse lessons at the time. It wasn't horse lessons at all. It was life lessons. So over the next few years, and everything that's unfolded since then, Honeybee is 15 now, and she lives on the Hawaii homestead. She is my reflection or my gauge of where I'm at internally. And her life circumstance reflected the circumstances of my life. And they seem to at each stage of life that we go through. So Honey was my first horse experience. And she required, because of her past traumas, required me to step into a place that was deeper and at a higher level of commitment than anyone else that was in our barn at that time. This was rehabilitating a wounded souls, because I was also one, but I didn't again know that at the time. And that just one horse led to two horses, which led to more horses. And through a very, very vast web of signs and symbols and synchronicities, I've ended up where I am today, working as a congruent communication coach for both humans and horses, helping us return to balance and reciprocity with the natural world, since we are nature.
Wow, thank you, Jo. That was beautiful. I remember bits of that, but I'm still hearing it with new ears too, because you can listen to something and then you hear it again and it's slightly different, or it has more meaning or different meaning. So persistent for you certainly paid off.
It did. And that's quite out of character, even still for me. Unless it's that intuitive feeling like, this is the thing, go after this.
Yeah. And
And
you both needed each other. So I know she wasn't the easiest of horse, and you had to delve deep. But for you, after what you mentioned earlier, that was probably something you really needed too. You needed to go to those areas that we don't necessarily go to, and especially as a young woman too. It's only as you get older that you start to think, well, why does that happen? And you question things, and you question yourself. When you start taking responsibility for your own actions and seeing that things happened around you because of your choices, your decisions, and it's not anybody's fault, it's just choices. When you start to look at yourself, that's when you get insights and things come along, and you have reflections. And animals they touch parts where a human can't go. Basically, they get straight to the soul, and you will do things for an animal that you won't necessarily do for yourself, although that's not what they want you to say. And that's where a lot of horse relationships, whether you ride or don't ride, whatever you do, animal relationships, they start you on a particular journey of opening up.
yeah, that's it.
So can you explain to people what a congruent, that's a word I can never roll off the tongue, a communicator is? What exactly does that mean? I know what that means, but what does that mean for the viewers and the listeners?
So I'm going to take us back to the beginning of communication as animals. So we enter the world as human animals, and we receive information just as all other animals in the animal kingdom do through our sensory system, our entire sensory system. So we're taking in information through sound, through sight, through smell, through taste, through touch, and through deeper senses that are coming from a place of energetic knowing, spiritual guidance. What I have observed and what the horses continue to share is that as humans have evolved, as we have gone from the nomadic lifestyles that we had thousands and thousands of years ago, as we domesticated horse and we moved into more stationary lifestyles where we began to build villages and have agriculture and then advance even further to where we are in the modern world, we moved away from nature. And we moved away from needing to rely upon that sensory system, that sensory receptor, to communicate fully. We now rely, and I'm speaking in generalizations, there are lots of people and specific cultures around the world that have not moved away from this, or have been able to keep the volume of that sensory system turned up since they were very small. But when we're born into the modern world, most of us start receiving information through that sensory system at a very, very young age, that if you don't see something, it's not real. That there's a period of time as an infant and toddler where it's acceptable to have imagination and to see things and to hear things that aren't visible to sight or touchable. But then we get to a place where we're asked to please quiet those things down, that they're not real. And that's actually our natural system of communication. So having this conversation with words is just a fraction of the way that I can communicate with you, with the horses, with the trees outside, with my ancestors or those who walk beside me from higher places. So what the horses started to show was that in all of these different techniques or methodologies that we would approach them with, that were focused on creating clear communication, concise communication, communication grounded in connection. We were doing it from a place of limited sensory experiencing. So we were taking in most of the information through our eyes and through our touch. What could we see the horse doing? What could we, and then when you see something, that information comes in and goes right to the brain. It's analyzing, making a decision, comparing it back to something that you've seen, or creating some level of story. So a story about what could happen, what has happened, of patterns. And then we use touch also. So we would create touch communication with the horse and use our eyes to receive feedback. So for the most part, most of these communication methods with horses for training or teaching purposes were limited to those two senses. And that the horses asked us to step forward and to return to that original state of communication, which is using all of our senses to communicate, returning back to how we were designed to come into the world and communicate outside of the confines of what we've learned or been brought up in. So congruent communication is communicating with self, with others, with environment, through the entire sensory system, and checking or being aware of the congruence or reciprocal nature between all of the senses, between all of the way that information is coming in. And each individual has a different set of preferences or senses that are the more predominant senses through which they receive information. Some people are really visual, meaning they get a lot of imagery or things come into their mind's eye. Some people are really auditory. They hear things that come in. Some people feel things in their body, like actual sensations in their body. Some people have a knowing that comes into the place of center and they act from there. Some people are still very closely attached to their sense of smell and taste and receive information that way. What I help people do is begin to turn the volume back up on how are those senses even saying to you? When we take away sight and we allow ourselves to drop into our body and we start to experience the world through a sense. So with eyes closed, we listen to what's happening around us in the environment. And we allow all of the physical sounds to move through our mind, just noticing. But then we take it deeper and we begin to listen to the feeling. What is the energy signature? What is the sound telling you about the environment? Did the birds go quiet because it's rest time? Did the birds go quiet because there's a predator in the area? Are the birds making a different sound because they're making a warning call? Or are they just chatting about daily life happenings? There is a energetic frequency or vibration feeling that's occurring at all times in the environment. And we can tune into that through different senses. So if you're auditory, you're going to be able to use your sense of sound to really feel what's happening and take that information in. Horses are doing this all the time, and animals are not just horses. Animals can lose a sense. They can move through life without a sense, being non-human animals, and adapt fairly well. Humans do this too, but we're really afraid of not being able to see, not being able to hear, not being able to move our body. because we have moved away from trusting or even knowing that we have a highly advanced and keen sensory system that will compensate or step in and make up for places where we might have something taken away, where we might need to fill in the gap. If we don't have sight, our other senses will step in. So teaching people how to communicate with themselves and understand this is how I receive information. I'm really auditory, or I'm really visual. And then knowing that it's always a combination of things. We receive information through all of our senses. But if you're a predominant seer, mind's eye seer, and then you get intuitive knowings with that, those are going to be the way that we start to structure your communication experience with others. So it started with, how do we do this to get something, not from the horse, to build something with the horse? Because this all came through the pathway of communicating with horses. And the horses very clearly said, stop, it's not about us at all. You can't even begin the conversation with us until you find congruence in yourself. So you are able to check yourself and say, wow, right now, my emotional body and my physical body are out of balance. When we get to a place where we're in inner congruence, we're using our sensory system to move through our life, we then are able to start reaching out to create connection with the horse. And connection with horse or any other animal or the environment occurs when the other, we'll say horse as example, the other is also congruent. So there are some times, more often than not, that we're working with animals in domestication that aren't living in a state of congruence when the human arrives into the situation. They pull a part of themselves out of their bodies as a mode of protection. Simply, like in the most simplest terms, just because their history with humans is that we don't understand how to communicate the way that the natural world communicates through these senses as a whole being experience. So they just pull a little bit of themselves out and say, yeah, humans here, a little bit of distance because they don't get it. They have forgotten. When you show up to a horse and you say, hey, I remember now. Look at, I can communicate to you on this level of congruence within myself, and I'm offering that out to you as a bridge to have connection with. The horse might have some stuff they've got to work through too to find congruence. And so then in the process of beginning a connection with a horse, which I teach people by using their primary senses of receiving information to begin to send things to the horse through those senses. And the horses then begin to show us how they receive. So some horses receive images really well. Some horses don't. Some horses receive the energy behind or the intention behind what words carry. And words don't have to even be spoken, they can just be thought. Some horses feel things in their body. So you feel something in your body and you send that feeling over to the horse to share that. And so we then begin to share with the horse that they can find congruence, that we notice that there's a place of incongruence when we, as the humans, show up in their situation, and that our purpose in being in that relationship with them is purely just to create a place where we're both congruent so that we can connect. When we get to that place and we can connect, that's the place that communication can begin to develop. And that was what I struggled for so many years, working with horses in training, working as a riding instructor with students, that there was this I felt like there was like 2 steps missing in the staircase. Like, how do you go from just being here and, you know, I understand this knowledge about, this is how horses behave. They're prey animals. This is what they do. This is pressure and release. Here are all of these things scientifically about horses and animals. Yes. And scientifically about humans. Yes. But what about the thing that we can't touch? We can't see? The thing that comes from that deep knowing. What about those steps? Because I felt that those steps, something about that was really important to getting to this place of communication the horse wasn't communicating because they had a choice. They had a choice to communicate. I wanted that level, and not just to experience it in my own life walk, but to be able to share that with others and open the door to say, there's such a deeper level of partnership or relationship you can have with a horse, with your dog, with someone in your family, with the land that you live on. And that was that piece of, wow, it's that congruent communication from the sensory system, from the whole being, spirit, the senses, that allows us to connect. And that we kind of skip those pieces. They're just not prioritized or held in, they're just not held in priority in the majority of the modern world's systems. And so communication was just a little fraction of what it could be. And it was built from a place that didn't have true connection because it didn't have congruence of self, other, and environment.
Thank you, Jo. That was beautiful. That was beautifully explained. As you were talking, and it was funny because I sometimes I feel, sometimes I sense, sometimes I get a visual, but it's not like looking at you. It's just it's like it's just there. And there was this sense of like horses lined up in a semicircle, sort of nodding, and then saying, and imagine what that's like when you've got 10 people trying to talk to you all at once, and we're all different and we all communicate in a different way. How confusing that is. And that sort of came through as you were talking. But also, we were brought up not to think like that. In the Western world, you go to school, you get a job, you know, you learn about all the things that you think you should know about, but you're not taught so much about feeling, being honest, and being able to speak. In a classroom, you go to school and you speak certain times, but there's a window of opportunity. And if you're not happy about something, there's not always the time to explain. So I'm sort of generalizing here. It's not like that everywhere. And I know it's changed. And there's mobile phones, the TV, the radio. We're all guilty of wanting to fill our heads with sound and distractions. And it's habit, it's habitual. It's only when you take a break from that and you sit with yourself, or you just allow your thoughts, which sometimes it can be difficult, because if people have things that need addressing, and that can be little things, big things, the thoughts come in and it's like, I can't do that now. I can't deal with that now. I've got a job to do. I have to do this. I've got children to look after. It's all this little chatter. So we get into that routine of not listening. And it's normally through something major that makes you listen, or puts you in a place where you can't move around. You've literally got to just be in that space. When things start to come forward and you start to sense things, and then it's then which, if you have an opportunity to understand what that is, if somebody's with you, or synchronicity, you hear a conversation, you hear a podcast, and it's this little spark, this little moment, and you might not even know what that is, but something's moving. The wheels are starting to move. And animals are great at doing that. Nature's great at doing that, going for a walk. So we are going in a different direction now, but it's trusting yourself. It's trusting what you get, and understanding what that is. Because sometimes people think, well, that's my thoughts, that's my imagination. How do I know that's from the animal? How do I know, what that is? Because it's your voice that you hear in your head. So explaining that is a big thing. It's a big step to say, well, actually, that's how it can start. Do you want to?
Yeah. And there actually was a point, like a moment that you just explained where I couldn't move. That I remember when this information started to trickle through. I have to keep laughing when I spend time with all the horses that are in the tribe. They do this thing now where they will like side eye look, and I can hear them laughing like silly human. Like, thank you for finally figuring. Like, thank you guys for being on the roll and understanding. Because I know now that they've been all of the things for the last 12 years that have been dropping in, furiously writing in my journal and drawing pictures and figuring out what is this, what am I getting? Like, what is this communication that I want to teach? It wasn't me getting any, I mean, I was receiving, but it was the horses dropping information in, and it was coming in through my voice. So I thought it was me. It was the horses just coming in a recognizable presence so that I could receive it, which was at that time my voice. Now I know when it's my voice and when it's someone else sharing something on that level. But I had honey during my teenage years, and I never thought horses were going to be a career path. That was the farthest thing from my mind. At that time, I was a professional snowboarder, and I was the coach for the instructor. So I coached coaches, and I taught people movement analysis. So I taught coaches how to watch a student on a snowboard, how they move their body, how the snowboard interacted with the body, or how the body affected the snowboard's movement in the snow, and taught people how to pick out effective and ineffective movement patterns, and how to then very quickly look at an ineffective or effective movement pattern and come up with a plan on how to bring that movement pattern into balance so that you can make the most effective turn in the snow or do the most effective trick. And that was what I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life doing. I loved being outside. I loved being able to use my body, but that awareness of body movements and the effect that they have on an outside object or how outside forces affect the body it was an embodied practice, but at the time it was a very cognitive practice. I relied strongly on my intellect and my ability to see something and then process it in my brain. And I was so angry when that was taken away from me through an accident. It wasn't an accident, an injury. I had an injury that seemingly came out of nowhere. It just appeared one day, and I no longer could perform that job. And I was ended up actually in a wheelchair for some time and in a walker. And my movement was stopped, and I was grounded at the barn. I lived at the stable where Honey lived, and I was offered like an apprenticeship my instructor basically said, do you want to just come and sit in the arena and watch me teach lessons? You're already a coach, so maybe you can sit out here in your walker and watch me teach horse lessons, and you'll start to pick up on the same types of things you were able to teach in snowboarding, but just with horses. Maybe this is the next thing, since you can't do that anymore. And that was this point of really recognizing the difference between equestrian activities and any other sport on the face of the planet. Horses are sentient, conscious beings. They're not snowboards. They have feelings and thoughts and bodies, and they are on a continually evolving path and journey. And yes, I could look at a rider and see the angle between the hip, the knee, and the heel, and the pitch of the upper torso forward, and know that it was creating X, Y, and Z in the horse during sitting trot. Like, I could see the movements happening, but it was different now because I wasn't making those analyzations with a inanimate object like a snowboard or the snow. It was another moving animal. And that was this shift of this is now an embodied practice. Like, I actually have to feel into, like, what does that feel like in my body as the horse is experiencing that? What are they trying to share probably with the rider's body? What kind of images, what is the transaction of communication going back and forth? And that was where I felt like there was those missing steps in the staircase. Like, wait, so you can't just create a movement, make a choice, create a body movement, and then say that that's communication. So I'm incredibly grateful for my injury, for having to be stopped, and from making that transition, which is an awareness from, wow, I relied upon my intellect. I relied upon knowing I could see something, which meant I could trust it, and then I could make a choice from there, to having that stripped away and having to learn how to acknowledge that, yes, I see something that makes sense on an intellectual level, but now I need to go deeper. What does it feel like? What if I couldn't see it? Would I still be able to pick up on what was going on? And how do we, if it's happening for me, it's got to be happening for other people. How do we make that translatable? How do we begin to open people back up to that?
Thank you, Jo. Once again, I'm sorry, but this happens quite often when people are talking, but it's coming quite quick with you. As you were talking, this horse came forward and said, please tell them about this. And a scenario is, sometimes there will be a horse carrying a rider, and the rider may not be able to sit or have their body in a certain way. And this particular horse's experience was saying that I move myself and carry myself in a way to enable the rider to be comfortable and to feel at ease at that moment. But sometimes that's seen by the observer as, I'm moving incorrectly. I am, but if I move correctly for me, the person will not maintain that position. And that's come really strong. And they wanted me to share that with the listeners. I know you're aware of that anyway. And also, there's a group, but this was one that came forward. Sometimes things cannot be seen with the naked eye, and that's why we, the horses, ask you to feel within yourself and trust that feel, because with the best intentions, people can say, this is what you should do, but you need to feel that within, and that's where the connection becomes stronger and becomes available to you as an individual. Yeah, thank you. So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jo.
No, that actually, I mean, what you just said is spot on from what I received from them. And as I continue walking my journey alongside both the physical horses, but then also horse, the big horse out there, my understanding is continually evolving and shifting and changing. And there was a point in my journey where I was like, no more riding. No, like, we're done with all of this. No riding, no tack. We still don't use equipment, but none of this. And I recently had one of my geldings come up to me and he was like, you could put a halter on us now if you needed to. We now know that we have a choice and that you'll honor the choice. But it was you as the humans who needed all of this time to not have restraint, not have equipment to restrain us, so you could learn to know what our choices were and to honor our choices. That was a sidebar. But what they have, shown, one horse in particular, he's a Oregon Mustang who's been in captivity for the last 16 years, and he's quite a phenomenal individual. But he came forward a few months ago and he said, what you saw in the journey, I took a drum journey several years ago, and I ended up in a place that I know as like the timeline of existence. And I moved along that timeline and I was brought to this place. And I was shown the symbol, like a pictograph of a horse. And I reached out to grab it. And when I grabbed it, I had this overwhelming sense that merged into my whole being of horses and humans have an like infinite energetic contract to work with one another, and that part of my purpose in this life is to be able to show other humans, by creating space for horses, that we have a deeper connection to the horse than physical interaction with them. There's something, that contract that we have between humans and horses is a contract about staying in balance with nature. So this one Mustang a few months back during a session is like, well, you know that we're not from here, right? What do you mean you're not from here? And he's like, well, we're celestial beings from a galaxy far away. You'll never know where, you won't ever see it. But we agreed to come here. And over the millennia that Earth has existed, we've come in different forms. But we've always carried the energy of horse. And our contract with you, our agreement is to basically hold space for the humans while they learn and they go through this lesson of coming back into the embodied knowing that we are nature. There is no separation between humans and nature, between horses and nature, between humans and the earth. We are the earth is us. And that there will be times that they are willing and they accept that in part of that contract or that role that they are serving out with us, we have had to go through, and we are going through, the acts of taking away choice from horse, the acts of dominance of horse, and then beginning to shift our awareness and become accountable so that the paradigm around horses and horse activities can shift. They will tolerate is not the right word, but like your example between the horse moving a certain way to be able to allow the rider to feel. Horses have this responsibility on a deep, like historical timeline, soul contract level of stepping in to allow us to learn how to feel. And feel is not just what you feel in your hands and the reins, how to feel, how to feel from the heart, how to feel from the place of center behind the navel, how to feel with the entire, physical body and sensory system. So yeah, they step into places where they will make sacrifices. And although they're all individuals here on the planet, they are here carrying the energy of that that bigger wisdom, the wisdom that is horse.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that doesn't. When we talk in that way, sometimes people might sort of start to switch off, think, "Oh, okay, here we go again." But when you break it down, and when you come back to yourself and your feeling, sometimes when you do something, you know you shouldn't be doing it. It's a simple example, or you walk into a room and you get a feeling from something, and you think, "Oh, I knew I shouldn't have done this. I should have gone to so and so instead of come here." But I'm here now, so I'll just put up with it, or I'll just get on with it. And you can almost feel this sort of closing off a little bit because you're going through the motions, and that's what a lot of horses do, a lot of the time. And it doesn't mean to say, so I'm going to pull back here. It doesn't mean to say that they're all treated badly, and we get them, we ride them, we do things with them. Yes, we do. Um, it's It's giving them a choice, like you said earlier. And sometimes if you say, "This is your choice, you don't have to do that," or "Let's see what's more comfortable," or what's more, acceptable, what are you more comfortable at, what's your passion for you, then they may say, "Well, I don't want to do too much of that, but actually today I'll do that with you because I know that's what you want, that you're excited about that." So sometimes when you give them a choice, they almost give you back what you're wishing for, but you have to do that generally. It's not like, "Well, I really want to do that, but I'll let you do that if you don't want to," when you mean, "Actually, I really want to do that." You've got to generally say, "I'm prepared to not do that
Right.
if that's not what you want." Does that make sense? I'm not sure I explained that very
Yeah,
clearly.
that's acting from a space of congruence
Yeah.
and of being accepting. You can hold a desire or a goal, an outcome, but being unattached to the timeline on which it occurs, and on knowing that if you're going to offer a choice out, just if you offer a choice out to a human, it's sometimes good to reframe the way we think about our relationships with horses and the way we think about our relationships with other humans, or even with our domestic household pets, because we treat them quite differently than we treat horses. And that if you put a choice out to another human, and you might want them to make a certain choice, but if you're saying, "But I accept whatever choice you make," and then you're upset that they made the choice that you didn't really want, well, you weren't really saying that they had a choice. You were like, "I'll say what you want to hear," but your words or your actions didn't match your feeling. That's incongruence in the self. And that's the place that horses say, "We need you to learn how to be congruent." When you act from a place of congruence, we are willing to connect with you in a place that we can then communicate, and they will do things, even if they're sometimes outside of what they really want to do, because they see that the human is in a place of of authenticity, of congruence, and that is part of their bigger purpose here to help us come back into that.
And as a human, when even if it's with a friend, when you've said something, but you don't really mean it because you just feel it. And normally the person that you're talking to feels that too. So you understand that, but that's actually a good thing, because if you recognize that, you recognize what that feel is like, that you're actually not telling the truth to yourself. So you're not honoring yourself, because actually it's not what you really want. It's not what you're saying. As you said, your words have a different vibration to what's actually coming out. So that's a good thing, because if you look at that, you start to know, well, if somebody says to me, "Are you okay with your horse? Are you scared of your horse?" You go, "Of course not." But you feel, "Actually, I am, and I shouldn't be." So if you think, "Well, I know I'm not telling myself the truth. So what is that? Is it because I'm scared of falling off?" No, it's not the case. So what is it? Is it because I'm scared of looking silly? no, that doesn't feel right. So what is it? And that's how you start to ask questions to yourself. And there isn't a book really that you can go, okay, that's the first lesson. That's what I'm doing right, or that's what I'm doing wrong. It's understanding what it is for your feel. And we've all got that skill. We've all got that. It's in our DNA, it's in our cells, it's in our whole being, it's in our energy. So it's there. When we acknowledge it, that's when things come forward and start to highlight. I.e., you go towards a horse and you think, I'm going to have a fun day today. And the horse runs up the field, say, not on me, you know, because they can sense something coming. It's like, well, I don't understand what's going on. And sometimes you don't, but you just have to pull back and think, okay, where am I? Where's my energy? What was I thinking? And you might not get the answer, but it's being prepared to just ask the question and see how that unfolds.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the first step is becoming aware, and it's awareness of self. So what are my thoughts? What are my feelings? What are the stories I tell myself that I might not even realize I've been telling myself for a long time, because it's just a story that's been around for, since I was young. Does that story actually exist in my life? No.
Yeah.
But why am I living by the outline of that story? When you become aware of self, first step, then you can start becoming aware of others. You can become aware of the environment and the relationship dynamic, or the exchange between self, other, collective, or environment. And then you sit in, what my experience has been, is that you sit in awareness for quite some time. Humans need a long period of having an awareness, and having an awareness deepen and become an awareness from many different perspectives, from many different sets of shoes, before we can become accountable to an awareness where we can say, okay, I got to do something to shift this, or this is not what I want anymore. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I acting this way? Sometimes it's really what's happening outside of us. Like, why do these situations keep cropping up in my life? Why do people keep treating me? Why does the horse keep running away? All horses do this. That we then say, okay, so I'm aware that there's something going on, and I'm ready to become accountable to that. So I'm going to start learning how to take actions to be accountable to my awareness. And that just continues to evolve into a place where you can then act from a place of alignment, where your actions in regard to that one awareness. So knowing that every aspect of our life is one little awareness in the big web of awarenesses. And then when you become aware of something, you can then eventually become accountable to your awareness. And then you can become actively aligned, where your choices all the time line up with what you believe physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And then you move into that place of attunement, where there's not any effort that has to be put into it. It's become a part of your being, that awareness, and how you want it to be present in an authentic way. But at every moment of life, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of different awarenesses that we're somewhere in that cycle of bringing into attunement, of becoming accountable to. And the horses offer us just such a beautiful opportunity, a beautiful space to get to explore that, because we can come to awarenesses about ourselves, or relationships we might have, situations we might be engaged in, without having a feeling of confrontation, because the horse is willing to hold space. The horse reflects back in an authentic way what we are navigating and moving through. So I agree with you.
Jo. Thank you, Jo. And it's not about being perfect, is it? They don't expect us to be perfect, because they know we're not. Far from it. They just want us to try, and to make a start. If somebody is listening to this now, or listen to the audio later, and they've got a horse and they're just going through the normal things that they do. And they'd like to make a change, but sometimes you can't change everything overnight, and how their life is and how their horse's life is might not sort of present that straight away. What would you suggest that they could do to start themselves on their own path as a as opening up to communication and to that deeper understanding, that deeper connection with their horse?
To begin a practice to connect with themselves through nature. So I find just sitting outside or walking outside, being out in nature and choosing a specific sense. So I am going to take my shoes off and walk around on the lawn. I know that there's nothing I can run into, so I'm going to choose that one somewhere safe, but I'm going to be barefoot and I'm going to close my eyes or wear a blindfold. And I'm going to experience what it's like to move through time and space, relying upon my sense of touch with the soles of my feet. And notice, what does that bring up? When I put the blindfold on, did I right away feel fear, lack of control, questioning if I can do this? What if I hit something? And then being able to just start to have the awareness to say, wow, that's an interesting story. I'm in the middle of the grass. There is nothing I can run into. It is soft and cushy. I am safe. I can do this. And just continuing through a very simple practice of connecting to nature and self through senses. You can do this by sitting up against a tree, eyes closed, listening. Wow, the birds are so beautiful, and the stream is making such a beautiful sound. Gosh, why is there a child crying over there in the background at the park? Like, just noticing like that brought up agitation. Why? What is that? Exploring what having self-awareness is, and really doing it through nature and sensory experiencing combined has come to be in what we've been practicing here with Choice Tribe students, is a very accessible way to begin to open to yourself, to be able to understand without getting really in your mind, without having any feelings of external judgment, and of being able to catch yourself when the inner critic comes out. Because nature is, just as the horse, because they are nature, is such a nurturing and embracing container. So when you step into a place of saying, I want to learn how to be more self-aware, and I'm going to ask nature to be my partner and my support system, and I'm going to use my senses to be my guide, you get to experience what the human animal, like the essence, the essential essence of the human animal experience is. And just that place, starting there, it's really beautiful to see how everybody unfolds differently, but how the experience of connecting with nature through the senses is very much the same, because we are all nature. So.
It's beautiful. I'll quite often take my shoes and socks off and walk around the field with thistles and nettles. I pick an area that's not too bad, but it always makes you feel like a child. So when you go to the beach, if even not in summertime, if you're walking in the beach on the sand and you can feel your feet sinking into the sand, and if the water's coming up, it just takes your attention somewhere else, and it does make you feel like you've gone back in time into being a child without the cares. And I think that's a lot of it. It's stepping out of that busy head and all the things that go with that, and quieting down. And also when you do that, you tend to, your thoughts slow down, but your speech can slow down. I'm sure you've found this. Sometimes you can be having a conversation, you've had a busy day, and you can be talking to somebody, but then I don't know, but I'm very conscious of my voice slows down. I know there's information coming through, and it doesn't matter. It's just, it can be a conversation about anything, but I know it's flown through as it should do, and you can feel that. But that's being aware for me over time, that I know that's my sign. That's what that is. And to start with, even if you think it's your imagination, it doesn't matter, because as long as you're not saying to somebody that's going to put them in danger or to hurt them, and which it wouldn't come that way anyway. But it doesn't matter if it's your imagination, because if it makes you feel a bit centered and it's nice for the other person, it doesn't really matter. And that's what I say to people is, you won't know until you start using it, because it's like a muscle. It has to know that you're opening to it. It's like a radio signal. You're trying to find the right frequency, and you can just hear something. But unless you play around with the dial and you actually get it on there, the rest of the sound, the music won't come through. And for me, it's, if I don't say that first word, it's almost like it's, come on, it's like a plug. And then once I say the word, the rest comes through, or the feeling comes through. And I don't know why I'm talking. I don't know why I've just.
It's the awareness, though. You were just speaking to, like, connecting, having that very present experience walking on the beach, like, and it allows you to move into your body, to be present, which opens you to receiving. It's it's being aware that you are in a body, but your body is also inhabited by an energy, and these senses. And it's like all of these little satellites, or radars looking for information. And when you start to become aware of, like, wow, when I'm walking on the beach, I feel this overwhelming emotion, or I get these images of these times in my life when I was really calm, or you start to notice, wow, I have a lot of imagery going on. Oh, I get a lot of feelings going on. It's just those awareness that you have when you're connecting with nature that they're pointing you, they're little signs saying, look there, that's how we're talking to you. Everything is talking to you all the time. Pay attention to the way it's coming through. That's where you're going with it, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for making that very clear, Jo. I know what I was going to say. That's where I was trying to head as well. Is sometimes you don't want to look silly. So it's fine if you're on your own, but even then, some people, we're all different, have been in a suit and tie for, like, most of the time, and that's how they feel. Even if they're in their shorts and t-shirt, they're still in that tie and a suit, and they behave in a certain way. To let go and allow that process, allow that fun side to come through, allow that silly side to come through, can be difficult for some people. But it doesn't have to be all in. It doesn't have to be bells, drums, crystals. It doesn't have to be that way. Sorry, but it doesn't. It can be a walk in the park. It can be sitting, as you said, next to a tree or on a bench and just watching a squirrel go up a tree, watching a leaf just blow across a pathway, just losing yourself in that moment. Not all spiritual essences are about gurus and monasteries. It's everywhere in life. It's everywhere, and we've got the choice to tap into that, and it's there for everybody. It's not for the rich, it's not for the famous, it's for everybody, everything. If we just open up to that and allow a little bit of it, just a little doorway, that's all your being, all your soul is asking is just let me in. just let me in a little bit and I'll show you there's another way. And that's all you have to do. You don't have to know the whys, hows. Just trust that that will be enough. You're giving yourself permission to see another way of being and going through this life. And that's what horses, animals, and people too are great at showing us, but not always in the way we'd like sometimes.
Yeah, that's true.
The best teachers are sometimes the ones you don't want.
Yes, yes.
Is there anything you'd like to, anything else you'd like to chat about while you're on? What about a story from an experience of somebody from the ranch that's come in and that they've, if you're allowed to do that, can you give an example?
Yeah. Let me think for a moment on that. I mean,
The essence of the story.
I
It doesn't
almost
have to be.
think like, so the human journey is, I love that I get to hold space and walk alongside humans in this journey. The horses' journeys are the journeys that, when you ask that question, that's what I went to. I started thinking of horses, not actually people. So a story, which is, it's kind of like the story of the evolution of Choice Tribe. It's all the horses that are in a part of the herd, both here in Bend, Oregon. I also have a herd in Hawaii. And then I have clients who have, small choice herds at home at their properties. And the journey or the story of watching horses learn and accept and acknowledge that we as humans are giving them a choice. And then being able to watch how each of them as individuals navigate that experience there's parallels in how humans do it. And then it's really fascinating to see when a human arrives at the campus to interact with the herd, which horse or horses choose to go and interact with that person, and without having any background knowledge on that horse and their personality or their experience, there's this natural gravitational pull, and they have very resonant journeys. So when we started giving horses a choice, we got experiences all across the board. I had horses that were the most well-behaved, obedient, highly trained school horses who I'd let anybody handle them. Wouldn't bat an eye. 2-year-old child, 90-year-old in a wheelchair. Like, this horse, they're like, I know my job. I'm calm. I'm quiet. I love being brushed. And some of those horses, when we gave them a choice, were like, oh, yeah, bye. And, kicking up and didn't let humans touch them for, 6 months to 2 years. I was like, we're done. And then there was other horses who were also well-behaved, obedient, who withdrew and went into this, rather than having this very outward, like, I have a choice now and my choice is no. They kind of withdrew and they stepped back and they observed everything, and they were very tentative about making choices in the presence of humans. And like, well, it was like one hoof in the water, like, oh, I'll try it. Nope, not going to try that yet. And then others who just were like, cool, all right, we got a choice. Yeah, great. You guys figured it out. So we can just continue on with life as if there was no real change. And through that experience, which we're now in year 4 of, the majority of the herds that are, within my world are 4 years into having a choice. And we get some new ones in from time to time, some new horses that join. But getting to watch that and then seeing where there are still issues, like still hurts or behaviors that are they seem incongruent, they seem out of alignment with the personality of that individual or the environment. Like it just comes and you're like, that's still so strange that that's occurring. And now getting to be in this place where we're recognizing that just like the people that are coming in to interact in these programs who might have, maybe big T traumas, little T traumas, but are coming with something. We all have stuff that we're working through. The horses, they have stuff that they're working through, that they're holding on, and they are no longer just holding it. They're now able to look at us and say, I need help. You now have the skills, you now have the level of congruence and connection to be able to communicate with me. Can you support me while I work through the trauma of my gelding? Can you work through and be there while you help me release the cords that I have connected to the foal that I lost when, she ran through a fence? And so those stories, those experiences that we're now as humans getting to hold space for these horses is so special, because it feels reciprocal. It's no longer just like, horse, how can you help me? It's, hey, I can actually hold space and be your support system as you navigate this, just like I would be for a friend, or someone that I love. It's that reciprocity in the relationship. And so those types of stories. And we do have a mare right now who we're working with. She lost a foal. The foal ran into a wire fence and got caught, and it spent all night trapped in the fence, and she stood with it before it was found in the morning, and they had to euthanize. And that was 15 years ago. And she has held on to that. And as she's working through that and releasing that, the changes in her personality, the changes in her mannerisms and her behaviors, she's a completely different horse. And so all of these judgments or labels that were placed on this mare for the last 15 years, they were rooted in this very traumatic experience. But because humans up until this point in her life couldn't hear her, couldn't understand what she was saying, because no humans had put in the time to learn how to communicate the way that the natural world has designed us to communicate, she acted from this place that seemed naughty or bad behavior, ill-tempered. She was all of these things. And that in itself, then having those labels was painful to her. So we've got horses with these stories. And when you get humans to a place where they can use their whole sense of self, their whole being to communicate, the stories that the horses are beginning to share are just magical to be able to be in relationship with them in that way. So I love the work I do with humans because it gets us to that point. And what a beautiful place the world is growing into, where more and more people are wanting to be able to have that level of connection with their horse. So many horses will have that. So
absolutely. And there were so many different examples, as you was explaining there, that once the horse knew they had a voice, some were like, oh, okay, great. And others withdrew into themselves, and others just went, bye. We sometimes have this vision that when we say that they go, oh, thank God you're listening. Okay, what is it you'd like me to do? And it's not like that. And sometimes you might never get to a point where they will 100% let you in, because their world and their trauma and their things it's up to them when they show that and when they're ready to let go. but it is linked all together. And sometimes the horse has a key and sometimes we have a key, and you get two people energetically together and there'll be click. Okay, and something will happen. Sometimes it can be lovely things and sometimes it's things you think, okay, but it shows you something. It shows you something about yourself and it shows you something about the horse. And it's fascinating because you can't say that if we do A, B, and D, we will get this result, because it can't work that way. It's not mathematical. It's energetic and has its own time frame. It has its own evolving where it's going to go. And maybe there's reasons that we are not able to see yet, because if we did, we wouldn't take that particular path. We wouldn't read the book if we'd got to the end and knew how it finished. We'd just put it down. We wouldn't experience it. We wouldn't learn about ourselves, because as we learn about ourselves, we learn about the world, the animals, and the people around us. Because I'm sure you know anyway that lots of people that work with horses and deal with horses, they'll see their relationships change with their friends and their partners, and they're more amicable or they're more understanding. Doesn't mean to say they have a smile on their face every day and everything's fine, but they're able to go through these emotions and let them go easier than they could before, which is a huge, huge thing for humans to do.
Yes.
Well, it's been fascinating speaking to you, Joe. I've been very conscious because I know you've got a horse that you want to go check on. So there's lots more questions I could ask you, and to go a bit deeper than we have already, but we've gone quite deep. So if anybody has a question before we finish, a quick question that they'd like to ask Joe, please go ahead. And while Joe's just summarising her last few words, and then if we've got a question, we'll pass that on. But if not, we'll bring this to a close. So if you'd just like to say a parting few words, Joe.
Well, thank you so much for reaching out. You were one of the first people that contacted me after the Warwick podcast aired. And it's been really beautiful to see the word that has come over and over and over is resonance, or resonated. And that, you know, you're holding space on this podcast to share experiences and ideas that will resonate with others, and that those resonances are what connect us and connect the horses and connect us back to nature. So thank you so much for creating and holding this space. And I'm just really grateful to have been able to share with you today.
Oh, thank you. It was pretty quick when I answered. I must say, I don't think I've done that before, not that quick. And I was really surprised when I got an answer. So I was like, okay. So thank you. Okay, I don't think we've got any questions. Right, okay. So thank you so, so much, Joe. I hope your horse is okay. If you don't mind just hanging just back for a little while and just have a quick word before we go. So if you'd like to say bye to the listeners and the viewers.
Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful day.
Bless her. What a lovely, lovely lady. Yeah, so if you haven't heard the podcast with Warwick Schiller, go and have a listen to it. It was just, it's one of those, I was poo picking at the time, but I don't care because that's what I always do. And I was listening away, and Warwick himself said he was just sitting back and listening, and she had this beautiful voice. We did have a headset on early, but it didn't work. But the sound was fine, and that's what's more important. Okay, you got the information come through. If you have any questions, all the links to her website, to Joe's website, is at the end of this video, and I'll also put it on the podcast too. If you want to contact her, I'm sure she'll be more than happy to hear from you. Thank you for stopping on by. Hope you're well. Hope you're having a lovely bank holiday Monday here in the UK, and enjoy the rest of your week. Until next time, take care and bye for now. Thank you.